Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. This week I'm going to be showing you guys how to throw a bowl on the wheel, so let's go ahead and get started. Alright, so the first thing that we want to do is go ahead and get this centered just like you would anything else. Alright, so we'll go ahead and open this up just like any other pot that we'd be throwing. Now you do want to think about how wide you want your bowl, because that's going to dictate kind of this beginning step here. So this is a bit thick. I am leaving a little bit of room for compression and to kind of bring this out. I do have a large lump of clay here, so I am going to want a larger bowl. So I am going to end up bringing this out a bit more. And instead of just starting to kind of pull this outward, you really want to compress down and out. The reason for this is you don't want to end up ripping the side part of this clay off of the thing that's actually stuck to the bat itself. So instead, what we're going to do is we're going to push down and out. So as we open this, you can kind of see the bottom of this start to widen up a little bit. You never want this top part to really be any wider than the part that's actually touching the bat or the top of the wheel. So just going to push this down and out, and you'll see that it should all relatively stay at a right angle here for the most part. It's not going to be perfect, but that's fine. Oh. Got a little bit of an air bubble in here. Sometimes I'll go back and forth if I end up with an air bubble, especially with these wider lumps of clay. That can be pretty common. So there we go. Always gotta make sure you're compressing, and then we'll bring this top back in. So that way it's all one straight line down. So now that we have this about as wide as I'd want my base, and that's going to be about this wide, I'm going to go ahead and get this a little closer to center now that we're a bit bigger. Okay. So once we are here, we're going to go ahead and start pulling. Now, the thing about bowls is you don't want to try and make the bowl shape immediately. You always want to pull up before you pull out. So we'll go ahead and pull this up almost like we're doing a vase or just a really large cup. Basically, how we would do this with any other pot. Now, the more clay that you use, the wider this is going to want to spread as you do this. It's going to immediately want to flare because its center of gravity is being pushed off with the rotation. So if you find that this is happening, just go ahead and bring it in. It's easier to do it as it happens rather than wait until it's so far out that it doesn't really want to retract back in. So I always do this almost every other time or almost every other pull with larger pieces here. Once you think you have this about as tall as you can get it, and I think this would be about my last pull, we'll go ahead and start to kind of clear up the bottom. It's starting to flare out, but since I'm almost done pulling, that's not too much of an issue. I could bring it back in, but I'm gonna go ahead and just let it sit there. So next thing is I'm gonna clean up this whole bottom edge here. The reason for that is once we kind of start to shape this into the bowl, the shape that we want, it's just gonna be a lot harder to get under there because of whatever angle you decide to go at. Now, if you left it here, also works. These are all just individual choices. So if you choose to wait to do all the trimming and everything later, that's fine. I just like to go ahead and make it easier now because it's a little bit more accessible when it's at this angle than if I were to bring this down a bit more later. With these larger pieces of clay, you're gonna notice that when you're throwing them, you're kind of forced to leave a little bit more down at the bottom when you're doing this. And that's gonna be completely normal. It's not that you're bad at throwing or that, you know, you didn't get all the use out of it. I mean, sometimes that can be the case, but for the most part, it is harder to get this. And also you wanna make sure that it has enough to support all of what's on top of it. And so if you end up with more down here, it's not going to be an issue of whether or not you threw it well enough. You can always trim it off later, but in order to be able to support all of this weight above it, it needs to be thicker. So if it doesn't come out as thin as your smaller stuff, that's totally fine. So now that this is all together, I'm just gonna give this like one last little pull, see if I can get anything else out of there. But now that's pretty even, what we're gonna do is, instead of pulling anymore, now we're gonna go ahead and shape this. So I'm gonna go ahead and make this a little bit wider. So the whole reason that I pulled up before I started to kind of make this bowl shape is because essentially if you end up trying to go for the bowl immediately, one of two things is going to happen. Either you're going to leave a lot of clay down here to be able to support pulling at such an angle, meaning it's going to cause a lot of stress in this bottom edge where the base meets the walls of your pot. Or the opposite can happen. You're gonna end up making it about as thin as you typically want a bowl to be, but instead you're gonna end up actually ripping it as you pull from this bottom half because you didn't leave an excess amount of clay here. Whereas if you lift up before you lift out, the thing is once we get to this point of shaping, all I'm going to do is just apply a little bit of pressure to get there. And the thing is it's not going to rip, even though it is a little bit thinner, because I am not pulling, I'm not applying a lot of tension on this bottom edge. All I'm doing is simply adjusting where it sits. So you're just going along its center of gravity and you're just adjusting where it sits. Sometimes I like to keep a hand on the outside here. I'm not pulling, I'm just kind of using this hand for stability, just force of habit. It's not necessary. Now we'll go ahead and clean up all of our water out of here because you always want to clean up your excess water. And if you'd like to, we can go ahead and cut off our rim, which I always like to go ahead and do just to get that sense of evenness at the top, even though it's not too far off, but I like things to be perfect, or at least as close as I can get them to. If you're a perfectionist in ceramics like I am sorry. It is something you will struggle with, at least for a while. This is starting to get a little bit heavy, so I'm gonna go ahead and just leave it. All right, everyone, so there you have it. That is how to throw a bowl on the pottery wheel. And if you liked this video, go ahead and hit like, subscribe, and thanks for watching. I'll see you all next week.